I think the sector that is particularly impacted at the moment is the consumer market. I personally think this is a short-term problem, and that, very shortly that consumer market will pick up again. I think the business investment is following the trend of moving towards high quality production, manufacturing production. Well, UK businesses are today much more engaged in the economics and the economy of China. China is exporting into the UK and has also made investments into the UK. So that linkage between China and the UK has become very important. And in my view, it's been beneficial for both sides. GDP of China is 17-18% of global GDP, so it's part of the global economic system, and we can't, none of us can function without it, and China can't function unless it's part of the rest of the world as well.
Good afternoon, Peter. Thank you for joining us today. As a veteran banker, you have lived in Hong Kong for more than 20 years. How do the economic growth and business opportunities in China have an impact on your professional career and personal life?
Yeah, well, it's been absolutely massive. Almost my entire professional life has been dedicated to that process. So when I came to Hong Kong back in 1995, I think Hong Kong was somewhere around 20% of the GDP of China. And of course, China has just grown so massively since then. The GDP of the United Kingdom was twice the size of China in 1995. And today, of course, the GDP of China is a multiple of the UK. So that's had an enormous impact on the way I've conducted myself and the way I've seen business. And I've seen the changes in the business landscape in China. So in 95, 96, 97, as the reform and opening up program began in China, what we were really involved in was raising external capital for investment into China through IPOs, through debt issuance, through a little bit of inward M&A. And then very slowly over the decade and a half, China began to build up this stock of wealth and capital. And actually, it wasn't necessary anymore to bring capital from outside and put it into China. The reverse began to happen. So China began to deploy its capital externally because there'd been this great accumulation of capital and cash over that period of time. So what went from kind of an IPO and capital markets market became also an advisory market into, some of the countries in Southeast Asia, across Africa, into the Middle East, and of course into the West as well. And over that period of time, we've also seen the enormous growth in trade between China and the rest of the world, which was certainly there in 95, but it was much smaller than it is today. It's had a huge impact. It's had a huge impact on the world, but I've been privileged to be at the center of all of that.
I remember you also, in your letter to CBBC members, you highlighted China's economic journey from 1995 to 2024. And how has this accomplishment China achieved impact the UK businesses?
Well, UK businesses are today much more engaged in the economics and the economy of China. So there are some very large companies that have made big investments there. So some of them are really part of the domestic economy. Some of them are exporting into China. And of course, the reverse is also true. China is exporting into the UK and has also made investments into the UK. So that linkage between China and the UK has become very important. And in my view, it's been beneficial for both sides.
What is the significant impact of China's reform and opening up have on the global economic development?
So when I was here in 95, 96, 97, China was a domestic market, really. It was reforming domestically. And then as that capital stock built up, the focus shifted a little bit to opening up as well, to allow inward investment and to encourage outward investment as well. So the early days in the mid 1990s, China was still growing and securing the footings for its domestic market. But now it's really very, very engaged in the global economic ecosystem. And I don't see that changing, to be honest. GDP of China is 17, 18% of global GDP. So it's part of the world. It's part of the global economic system, and we can't, none of us can function without it, and China can't function unless it's part of the rest of the world as well.
So this year, CBBC is celebrating its 70th anniversaries. And I know it's an important organization with a pivotal role in fostering China-UK bilateral trade and investment. So in the future, how will CBBC enhance and sustain this effort?
It's important to look at the origins of CBBC. So it does go back 70 years. And there was a group of businessmen from the United Kingdom who went to China in 1954, so very, very early on in the new China, and said we want to have a commercial relationship with China, and that I think continues to be recognized in China actually as a pretty pioneering way of developing trade relations. And of course it's developed since then, and it's become what we have today, which is the China-Britain Business Council. So our job is to continue to do all of that, is basically to promote and foster trade, investment, commerce between both countries, to try and lobby for removal of trade barriers, for example, both ways, both in the UK and in China, to encourage policies that don't discriminate, to encourage engagement at a government-to-government level, which we're beginning to see happen again, and to see prosperity flourish, basically, but very much through the business angle. So we're not here to promote a political perspective. We're here to promote the business interests, because and that for me is very interesting. Businesses employ people, they pay taxes, they contribute to the community. So the success of business is, to my mind, very, very important.
And right now, what is CBBC's the UK business community view or see the Chinese market?
So some of our members have been in China a very, very long time. The organization I used to work for, Standard Chartered, has been there 165 years, and HSBC, an equivalent length of time. Aberdeen, which is an investment company, equivalent length of time. So there are many organizations who are very familiar with China and have been present in that market for a very long time. And I think they are very much committed for the long term. They see the benefits of this huge economy and the opportunities to do business in those economies as well. Shorter term, I think the sector that is particularly impacted at the moment is the consumer market, because consumers don't have the confidence to buy and purchase and be active. I personally think this is a short-term problem, and that, very shortly that consumer market will pick up again, and those important British brands like Burberry, like there are others as well, Holland and Barrett and others, will continue to grow at an incredible rate. You've got a middle class in China of, by some estimates, 800 million people. So you can't, if you're in a consumer products, you can't ignore that market.
Could you also share some latest data, perhaps the UK's businesses investment in China right now, and what sectors or what industry are they mainly involved in?
So it's across the board, really. It's somewhere around 80 billion pounds, which is invested, and that's in financial services, including Hong Kong, by the way. So that's in financial services, it's in some manufacturing, it's in pharmaceuticals and healthcare, it's in consumers. So some of the consumer brands that are British have actually got investment in operations and manufacturing capability in China as well. So it's really very broad based. I think the business investment is following the trend of moving towards high quality production, manufacturing production. So you won't see people investing in clothing. So it's across the board, and the brands really matter as well. So the brands are trusted, they are reliable, and they deliver on their promise.
But how do you perceive Hong Kong's special role in the BRoll Initiative?
So Hong Kong is China's offshore financial center, and the Belt and Road Initiative is an offshore infrastructure and trade initiative. And so that puts Hong Kong right at the very center of the development of the Belt and Road. So Hong Kong should be engaged in finance, but also there are other capabilities here like engineering, like sourcing, like trade finance that comes out of the Belt and Road. And a lot of that is being routed through Hong Kong. So it's a very important financial center. It's a very important logistics center, and will continue to be, I think, and play its part in building the Belt and Road.
It has been 10 years since the proposal of the BRoll Initiative, and over the past decade, what do you think of the development achievements of the BRoll Initiative?
So the way I look at the Belt and Road is it's obviously an infrastructure project, but it's also a trade project. So if you own a big house in a poor area of town, what you want is the poor area to come up, to rise up, to become more prosperous, because if you've got prosperity around you, then you will be prosperous as well. So what are the ways that you can make your city more prosperous? You can build an MTR, you can build more bridges, you can invest in infrastructure, which is schools, hospitals, which is going to make people's lives better. And if you do that, so that's a micro level, and the Belt and Road is really a macro version of that. It's really enhancing development across very extensive neighboring countries.
What is your expectation for the next 10 years to come for the BRoll Initiative?
Well, there's no doubt that the world needs more infrastructure. It needs more hospitals, it needs more roads, it needs more ability to connect, it needs more digital capability, and all of this needs to be done in a green and sustainable way. So I think we will continue to see this project develop along those lines, but with a much, much greater emphasis on green and sustainable, not just financing, but also infrastructure and outcome.